BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello. More than 1 million homes will be bought and sold just in 2024. That's millions of buyers, of sellers, of solicitors and of agents, all working to accomplish that end point where the new owner picks up the keys. But as we will hear on this Moneybox Live podcast, there is a lot that can happen between viewing a property and actually getting those keys, especially if the process falls through.
It's an absolute roller coaster at the best of times, but when you then get a phone call the week after to say that all those emotions have been a waste of time and that the agreement has been reneged, then it's heartbreaking.
Buying a home is legendarily one of the most stressful events in life. So today we're going to try and take some of the pressure off by talking you through exactly how to buy a home. Before we meet today's experts, let's hear from the front line of house buying. I spent the morning in Stockport with Clive Tattersall, the managing director of Jules Estate Agents, as he showed potential buyers around some of the properties on his books. We started with first-time buyers Ottilie and Adam, who were looking for a home with their dog Smirk.
Come on then, monkey. Shall we go and see?
It's a landmark building. It is listed, but you'll see there's historic features inside as well. That you can,
so we've kept some of the original features.
Particularly the beamwork, actually.
Oh, brilliant.
Oh, that's your favourite. Beams.
Okay, let's go and have a wander inside.
Oh, it's so light.
And so, again, look at these windows here.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
First-time buyers, how many properties have you looked at so far?
We've had about 2, isn't it, so far?
To be honest, we've not yet. I mean, we absolutely adored this one, so this one, I probably shouldn't say this, but this would be our priority.
I love that your dog in your arms is trying to eat my microphone. Hello.
Sorry about that.
So tell me, as first-time buyers, what are the sort of priorities for you?
For me, things like heating and the actual amenity, having something that will not cost too much to heat and to run.
I think for me, it's a slightly different priority. I just have to fall in love with it because I am self-employed and this is my office as well. I fully work from home. It's got to be somewhere that I feel like I'd love for a long time because it's not just my home, but it's my workplace.
Do you have a solicitor yet?
We've got someone we could use. Like I said, I've got a good network of people I could probably
I think that's
look
next
upon.
on our list, isn't
But
it?
we haven't thought about that yet until you've said that now and then we're thinking about it.
We've discussed it with the mortgage advisor, but we haven't appointed anybody yet.
Do you know what the process is like for buying a home?
I thought I knew quite a lot until you've just asked that question. And now I'm thinking, no. We knew we had to get a mortgage in principle. Obviously, the larger the deposit, the better. But I think we've been more thinking about the practical side in terms of money, not in terms of the legal side. So maybe not.
Because I've had friends within the process, I knew I'd had people to call on. So if I didn't know it, I'd know someone who did. But if I didn't have that, I must admit it's not exactly an easy process to navigate at all, really.
The bit that we see now, this is going to be the drive for the detached house.
Yes.
Okay, my name's Clive Tattersall from Jules Estate Agents. I've been in this business a remarkably long time. This is my 44th year. So
You must have started when you were 3.
if only. What I can say, in that time I've sold over 5,000 properties. So, I've had a lot of experience and seen lots of changes as I've gone along the process.
How long do you think it typically takes from somebody looking around a property, deciding, yep, that's the one for us, and them actually moving in?
Well, the first secret we keep is not letting them know how long it is going to take, actually, because from when they see it to when they actually get the keys, if it's a straightforward sale with vacant possession like this one here, it's likely to be up to 3 months, but it could be a lot longer. If there's a chain involved, we've had people who've been waiting 6, 9, 10 months, and even longer.
Has the process become more straightforward over the years with the internet, with everything being digitalised?
The theory was it would. The truth is it hasn't. The completion times that it takes now is actually longer than it was when I first came into the industry.
You seem very relaxed for a man who has to deal with the agonising admin and paperwork of selling and buying houses all day long.
I don't think it's relaxed, I think it's beleaguered.
Some buyers being shown around by Clive Tattersall from Jules Estate Agent there. Well, listening to that are today's property purchasing experts. I'm joined by Beth Rudolph, who's a director at the Conveyancing Association, and Simon Gammon, head of finance with the real estate company Knight Frank. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Hi.
Thank you both for being with us. Beth, I think our listeners will be surprised, like I was surprised, to hear that it takes longer now to buy a home than it did when Clive first started out in the business 44 years ago. Surely with the internet, with digitalisation, you'd expect it to be quicker. So what's going on?
Oh, it's incredible, isn't it? When I first started 34 years ago, so mere spring chicken compared to Clive, it took 6 to 8 weeks. That was what we told everybody. But the reality is that things have got a lot more complex and a lot slower. And the reason for that is partly because we used to have deeds packets. So as lawyers, we could get the deeds packet and go through and identify all of the warranties, planning permissions, insurances, all of the information related to the property. Even there would be memos in there where we had taken a view on a previous transaction and had to explain in there why. Well, those have all got lost since the dematerialisation of deeds by the Land Registry, and there's no excuse anymore to have fireproof safes and store these deeds packets. And that's a real problem because as conveyancers, we have to recreate the title every time the transaction goes through now, and that's what takes time.
And takes potentially months and months. Well, we asked the Society of Licensed Conveyancers about some of the criticisms there are over timing. They said that there are lots of issues contributing to the delays. For example, the time it takes for responses to come back for local searches. And they also said the industry has been struggling to recruit and retain staff. Simon, the trouble is, of course, the more time it takes for something to go through, the more time there is for changes to happen that scupper the sale, like a change in a job or a relationship breakdown.
Yeah, it's absolutely the case, and I see it from the property side. It's taking enormously longer. It's a real challenge for everybody.
Now, there are signs that the housing market is warming up, aren't there? Mortgage rates are coming down, and the latest data from Halifax shows prices reached a record high last month. Simon, for anyone who is about to start house hunting, what's it looking like out there in terms of choice and, of course, price?
I think we've seen the mortgage market improve quite a bit over the last 6 to 8 weeks. We've almost been sort of waiting for the property market to get going. Traditionally, it would really get going in September. But I think, anecdotally, in the last couple of weeks, I'm certainly hearing from my estate agency colleagues that they're feeling much busier. They're doing a lot more viewings. So it's looking positive, but it's not a sort of an avalanche of activity quite yet.
Now, we've had a message from Deb on X who says, I have experience of English and Scottish property sales and purchases, and the Scottish system is so much less painful with less scope for what she calls faffers. Simon, how different is it across the nations?
It's pretty different, and I have to say I'd agree. I mean, the 2 or 3 main differences are, in Scotland, you get given a home report and sort of information pack up front with everything from the survey, the EPC Energy Performance Certificate, detailed questionnaires. So you get all that information which removes the need or the risk of surprises. There's no real gazumping that goes on in Scotland, and that's where the seller decides to drop one buyer at the last minute and go with another because of a higher price being offered. It's very, very hard for a buyer and a seller to part company at the price they've agreed in Scotland. And then finally, estate agencies in Scotland tend to work and offer the soliciting or the conveyancing package altogether, so you can get the same service under one roof, whereas here in England it's a separate service.
Thank you. And Adam and Ottilie, Simon, they sounded like they were falling in love with that particular property. Yeah. If you do find the dream home, is there anything you can do that makes it more likely your offer will be accepted?
Yeah, I think it's always important to consider yourself in competition when you're looking to buy a house. You might know you're the only interested party, or you might be offering less than the asking price. But if you imagine you're in competition, you can put a very compelling email to the estate agent or a letter to the estate agent with your offer, and you want to explain why you're the best buyer. You might have an agreement in principle for a mortgage like they did. You might have no chain. You might be a cash buyer. But putting yourself forward as the best buyer, I think, is a great starting point.
Thank you very much. Right, before you get to looking for a mortgage, you will, of course, need a deposit. Let's hear from Imogen.
Hi, Moneybox. My name's Imogen. I'm 29 and I live in Derby with my partner. We currently rent. Our long-term goal is to buy a house in the next year. We just feel like it's a constant uphill struggle, really, to save for a deposit on a house. For me, and perhaps for people in their 20s today, it seems like it's a dream. What more could someone in my position do to really make the situation better for when we come to want to buy a house?
Right, we could do an entire programme on saving for a deposit. In fact, I think we have in the past. But Simon, briefly, Imogen's struggling to save. There are some government schemes around that could help?
Yeah, sadly, the Help to Buy was the one that you'd immediately go to, but that doesn't exist anymore. There are some ways to help save. Some people still have something called a Help to Buy ISA. There's now something called a Lifetime ISA, or a LISA, sometimes it's called, which is you can start between 18 and 39. You can save up to £4,000 a year. It's certainly a vehicle that I would really encourage people to take advantage of. But there aren't the sort of easy ways, apart from perhaps Right to Buy, to get onto the property ladder. There are some schemes available to help the lenders, and sometimes developers of new properties offer incentives, and they're important to keep an eye out for.
And we should say with those lifetime ISAs, you can add £4,000 a year and the government will top it up by up to £1,000. So potentially £5,000 into that account a year. What about paying rent, Simon? Can first-time buyers like Imogen use that to prove they can afford a mortgage?
Well, it's a very important marker for a lender that's underwriting. So when you're being assessed for a mortgage, one of the questions they will ask is, what rent have you been paying? If you can show a consistent level of paying your rent on time at a level that is equivalent or perhaps even more than the mortgage might be, it will certainly help you when it comes to that underwriting.
Thank you. Right. We should also actually mention the rental exchange initiative. And if you sign up to that, if you're a renter, if your landlord will sign up to it, then your rental payments can be used to improve your credit score. Even when you've saved up a deposit, though, it's still not necessarily straightforward. Here's Lisa.
Hi, Moneybox. My name is Lisa and I'm from Oxfordshire. I'm in my early 30s and I'm currently living with my parents. I'm trying to look for a 1 to 2 bedroom property in the Oxfordshire area. And especially being a single person, it's very difficult to achieve. I do have a significant deposit, though mortgage lenders still do not want to give me as much money as I need to buy a property in this area, but I do want to avoid going up 2 to 3 hours away, especially if my job is only 15 minutes away currently. What can I do to try to help me get on the housing ladder?
Beth, you can hear she really doesn't want to move much further away. Any advice for Lisa?
I think it's just managing your expectations, really, as awful as it is to say. In most cities and towns in the country, there is property that is available. It may not be, your 2-bed with a 2-bathroom, but, just looking at the market in Worcester, you can get a 1-bed flat for £70,000. Now, once you're on the ladder, it's much easier then to buy and move on up the ladder. But it's getting on that ladder, and she's very lucky that she's living with her parents and saving up a deposit. That is tricky for some people as well, but there are now some products out there, which I'm sure Simon could tell you about, where actually you don't need a deposit. Now that's very new, and it used to be like that all the time prior to the economic crisis. But keep an eye on what is out there, both in terms of financing and in terms of what property prices are there, because you can find affordable property.
Simon, that's a very good point, isn't it? That there are now 100% mortgages potentially available. We could do the whole show again just on finding the right mortgage. What kind of things should people consider?
Well, look, I think there's a product innovation going on all the time at the moment. The lenders have been through a period of 18 months of really not lending at the level that they'd like to. And so they're looking at every which way that they can do to support people who need a mortgage, whether it's be the loan to value, whether it's be what they call their income ratios, which is basically the lender being more generous. And obviously it's an improving picture at the moment. We've got mortgage rates slowly coming down, which means the lenders can lend more under their assessment of you. So it's about getting yourself in the most informed position, and either speaking to a lender or a mortgage broker will really help you.
Ali has been in touch on X to say, tell your listeners to consider a family-assisted mortgage if they're struggling. Briefly, Simon, what's needed to be considered there?
Well, I mean, it's sort of in the title, really. You're leaning on perhaps parents, grandparents who may be in a better financial position than you. Maybe they've got a larger income, and lenders will certainly look at ways of assessing you and your family for a mortgage that may be something you pay as the buyer, but you're supported, or if for any reason you couldn't make your payments, the lender can then go to your family to follow up with that.
Thank you. Right, let's just go back to Stockport, where Ottilie and Adam had a question for our experts.
How do we go about appointing a solicitor? What would our priorities be? What do we need to look for? What are the accreditations that they need to have?
Right, Beth, they haven't found a solicitor yet. I suppose the first question is a conveyancer different to a solicitor, and which one do you actually need?
Yeah, so when you're looking at appointing a legal representative, what you want to do is make sure they're specialist. So some solicitors are specialist conveyancers, so they'll have the conveyancing quality scheme. Otherwise, licensed conveyancers are just specialist conveyancers. Some of them do probate as well. And then there are legal executives as well. So all of these have qualifications to ensure that they're able to advise properly. What's important is to make sure that they're going to communicate with you in the way that you're comfortable being communicated with. You don't perhaps want one who's only going to email you if you're not into email and virtual messaging and things like that. So it may be that you want one that's going to give you a phone call every week to update you on progress. So there's all sorts of different conveyances, different ways of doing the work. And what's really important is to ensure that you're going to be able to communicate with them comfortably, you'll feel comfortable asking questions of them, and that you're going to get the information that you need when you're going to need it.
How do you pick the right one then, if there are all these different professionals that could carry out the conveyancing work?
The majority are picked through recommendations from friends and family, or the estate agent may well recommend the panel that they use. But bear in mind that the panel that they use may be paying a referral fee. So you want to make sure that that won't impact the service that you receive. But every single quote where there is a referral fee being paid will identify that fee and how much is going to and who it's going to.
That's a very important point, because Andrew has WhatsApped us to say, can or should an estate agent recommend a conveyancer? Do they have to declare an interest? Surely some transparency and caution is best, but they would have to tell you if they're getting that fee. Is that right?
Yeah, they would. But do bear in mind that estate agents deal with conveyancers all the time. So they know the ones that are the best ones, and the ones that they know will get the transaction through and that will ensure that the correct advice is given. Well, they'll all give the correct advice because they're regulated, but they'll ensure that they communicate in the right way. So it's just a question of making sure that that is balanced out with any fees being paid.
Thank you. Right, let's hear a voice note from Danny in Warrington.
Hi Moneybox. There seems to be a lot of information surrounding mortgages and rates and things like that, but one part of the system is the conveyancing side of things. Is it better to go with someone linked to your mortgage company, or is it better to get someone who's more independent? Is it better to spend a lot more money to get a really good conveyancer, or is there just a standard general cost?
Right, Beth, we've already talked about whether you should go with somebody who's been recommended by an estate agent, by a house builder. Clearly, Danny's got quite a few questions. I mean, is it worth, do you think, spending more on a more expensive conveyancer?
It has to be said, you pay for what you get. And if a conveyancer is only receiving tuppence halfpenny, they're not going to have enough time to provide you with the service that you will want. At the end of the day, every conveyancer, irrespective of how much they charge you, is regulated. So they have to provide you and act in your best interests. So that's not so much the issue. The issue is about how much customer service you're going to get. And how much communication you're going to get. So the more you pay, the more money they've got to be able to chase things up for you and to be able to update you on how things are getting on and to provide you with the information that you need to know about your intended use and enjoyment of the property and anything in the title or in the information received that might impact that. And one thing to note is that estate agents under the regulations have to provide material information on the adverts of the property. Now, it's not new. They're supposed to be doing it since 2008, but guidance was put out by National Trading Standards back in November last year. And so Rightmove and Zoopla and all of the property portals now have on there, on the adverts, and areas for that information to be put in. So how much service charge is payable if it's relevant to the property, if there's a lease, how long the lease is, if there are restrictive covenants that would prevent how you use the property. So when you look on an advert, if it says on there, ask agent, it either means that the agent hasn't provided the information, in which case you need to be a little bit nervous, or that there's something that you probably need to know, but they don't want to put on the advert.
Thank you. We've had a message in saying, hi Moneybox, you just mentioned the lifetime ISA as a useful way to save towards buying a house, but I think you should have mentioned the maximum house purchase price under the scheme that's not been increased since the scheme was introduced. Thank you very much. It's a very good point. If you do use that and plan to use your bonus to buy your first home, it's got to cost under £450,000. Simon, we're talking a little bit about different costs. There are, of course, surveys that need to be carried out on a property. 3 different kinds. Can you run through those and how much they might be?
Sure. So the first one is something called a condition report. It's the most basic report. It's often used for a mortgage valuation as well to get you the mortgage. They start at about £300. You'd be very unlikely to pay more than £700 or £800 for one. You've then got something called a home buyer's report, which is where, and that often includes the mortgage valuation, which is where you get a report to you as the buyer of any major issues on things to investigate. And then the most comprehensive is a building survey, which would probably cost you north of sort of £1,500. A home buyer's is probably £500 to £1,000. A building survey is the one I would recommend if you were buying an unusual property, perhaps a very old property, something that had an unusual construction or had had major works done to it.
There's just a lot of different costs, aren't there? You go into this thinking, right, the cost of the property is one thing, and actually there's all these other costs. We've had one message in from a removals firm saying, as a removals firm, we're interested but not surprised to hear no mention of the physical cost of moving as part of the process. The cost of moving, which can be as much as £2,000 for a 2-bedroom semi. Thank you very much for that. It's a very, very important part of the costs. Beth, it's really hard to track this, but several surveys suggest that between a quarter and a third of sales in England just fall through, they collapse. That's potentially a lot of wasted work and a lot of wasted money.
Absolutely it is. And that's very much, again, why you need to be looking for a property where the material information has been obtained. When you look at transactions where the seller has got a search when the property goes on the market and has paid for those searches up front, the transaction times immediately go down by 30 days. And that's not just related to the searches, it's related to post-valuation queries and things like that. But also you want to make sure that you've got a view of the chain. So View My Chain identify that 55% of transactions are in a chain, and it's much quicker, 17 days quicker, if they use products like View My Chain across the chain to be able to identify who needs chasing up when, because most transactions fall through either because the buyer can't get the mortgage that they needed because there's something that the property title has got going on that the lender won't lend on, or because of delay and people basically just get fed up waiting and decide to pull out and go and look for another one, or run out of their rental accommodation, so have to find somewhere else.
I mean, it is no wonder that this is considered a stressful experience, is it? Right, getting through the process is hard enough. Sometimes there are extra stumbling blocks. Now, one of those is the risk of another buyer putting in a higher offer. Simon, you mentioned this already, the dreaded gazumping. It can be really upsetting.
It's huge.
I'm Chris from Glasgow. The experience that we had with gazumping was, from what we were being told by experts, quite a rare occasion in the Scottish property market. So we put an offer in on a property. It was verbally accepted. It was then formally accepted and removed from the market. We then got a call from the selling estate agent the following week to say that they had received an offer even with the property being off the market, and the seller had decided to go with that offer, even though they had formally accepted ours. So they decided to renege on the agreement and went with the highest bidder. Obviously, when you are bidding on a property, and it's a stressful period, and when you do get an offer accepted, you're over the moon. But it's an absolute roller coaster at the best of times. But when you then get a phone call the week after to say that all those emotions have been a waste of time and that the agreement has been reneged, then it's heartbreaking. It really is.
Simon, it is heartbreaking, isn't it? You can hear it's heartbreaking for Chris, and a huge potential waste of money. How common is gazumping?
It's not so common in Scotland, but it is unfortunately a nature of the market. And when the market is hot, and there's lots of pressure on you. If you've got, there's multiple buyers for each property that comes onto the market, it becomes a very common thing, unfortunately. And you're absolutely right. It's a hugely stressful, very frustrating, leaves a lot of people very angry, and It's the sort of an unpleasant side of the market, but it generally tends to happen when there's a lot of competition for property.
It is interesting. You mentioned that it's much less common usually in Scotland, and data from the Scottish property website ESPC suggests less than 9% of sales fell through and went back onto the market in Scotland last year. Beth, what stage of the process means you're safe from gazumping or from other things like the seller changing their minds and pulling out?
Well, that's the trouble in England, is that until exchange of contracts happens, there is no legal commitment, and that at the moment is taking around 4 months to go to exchange. However, there are things called reservation agreements, and those means that you put in a down payment, and it means then that the seller can't pull out unless for specific circumstances, and vice versa. So you can avoid the risk of gazumping. The difficulty is that without the information provided up front to ensure that the property is the one that you want to buy and will meet your needs and your intended use and enjoyment, people aren't really keen on reservation agreements. And this is why this guidance on the material information is going to make a huge difference. Because if you know and you've got all of the information up front, then it does mean that you're more likely to be comfortable getting into a reservation agreement, knowing that you're buying the property of your dreams.
Jolie on X says sales collapse when buyers change their mind. No comeback. Live in England after our buyer dropped out 4 months after we accepted offer, and she was a conveyance solicitor. And Jolie says we paid for an information pack for our grade 2 listed home, including surveys, and sold again quickly. Right, so we're coming up to the end of the programme. Simon, very briefly, we don't want to discourage anyone who's at the beginning of this process. Do you want to give a final tip or a final pep talk to our listeners?
One tip I would give is maybe not at the beginning of the process, but if you have been successful and you've exchanged, don't forget about your mortgage. A lot of people exchange, think I'm there, I can relax. But a lot of people have time between exchange and completion, often more than a month. And in that period of time, especially at the moment when mortgage rates are moving so quickly, there may be an opportunity to get a better deal. The aim is to complete on the best mortgage you can, not exchange on the best mortgage.
And Beth, in a word, what's your top tip?
Don't believe in average prices. You see on the news that the average home price is £305,000, but in every town you can buy a property for less than 100,000. So if you want to get on the ladder, give it a go.
Well, we've definitely completed on this podcast of Moneybox Live. That is all we've got time for today. Thank you to everybody who took part in the programme, and thank you to our experts. We've been guided through the house buying process today by Beth Rudolph from the Conveyancing Association and Simon Gammon from Knight Frank. If there's a topic that you would like a how-to guide through, then just let us know. The email address is moneybox@bbc.co.uk, or you can send us a voice note or a message via WhatsApp. The number is 03306 783 183. 03306 783 183. In this podcast, the producer was Craig Henderson, studio manager Becky Marcus, our editor was Sarah Rogers, I'm Felicity Hannah, and this was a BBC News Money and Work production for BBC Sounds.
Cafe Hope on BBC Radio 4.
By the time I'd finished these 100 meetings, I'd raised £50,000.
I'm Rachel Burden, welcoming you into a virtual coffee shop where I chat to people looking to improve the lives of those around them.
It's about tackling isolation and loneliness.
Engaging in conversation with people, can make a massive difference.
Amazing individuals trying to make the world a better place.
It's a real gift.
Cafe Hope from BBC Radio 4. Listen now on BBC Sounds.